Hello, good morning. Welcome to another Random Code stream. This is going to be part 2 of doing some refactorings in rocks, and let's just get into it. So I got an hour or so this morning before I have to get over to my day job. So let me get some music going here. I believe I have the volume set. Okay. So last stream I worked on a couple of things. One of them was making a very, very small but measurable improvement to the verify method. And as we saw down here, making it return, instead of a list, returning an IEnumerable. It's very slight in terms of performance. Again, we're talking nanoseconds here. So none of this is going to be necessarily something that anybody notices. But any little improvement can be made. You know, even if you have many expectations, they all fail. It says like 6 of them fail. It was like 100 nanoseconds slower. But in every single case, it either was the same or a little bit less, like 100 bytes less memory. So to me, 100, 200 maybe. Again, nothing major. This isn't earth-shattering, but it is a measurable improvement, and we might as well change it. So I did. So that change was done. The one I'm going to do now is what I was talking about in the last stream, which is this type arguments naming context. So what I've thought about and landed on is this is going to end up becoming a nested type of method model, because that's the only place that you ever get a type arguments naming context for. And we're gonna have a method that returns a naming context, so you don't have to worry about the nested name or anything like that. So that is what we're gonna do. It's not gonna be a property on it, because I don't think, if we go look at like C# record exclude property from quality, a lot of people have. Yeah, you basically have to overwrite equals and get hash code. And it's like, no. I get it. I get it. Yeah, that's what you have to do. But that's a lot of work. It would be nice if you could have on a record, if you could say this property exclude from equality. But again, that's the point of a record, is that that's what it's supposed to do. That's just its behavior. If that's not what you want, then don't use a record. But then you have to, then it's also this, well, then I've got to create all this myself, So maybe you could have a source generator that if you have a record that has a property that's marked as excluded, then it'll override get hash code and equals for you and do the right work, so that the record would have to be partial. Huh. That might be an interesting little trick, because then you don't have to do that work. To do, consider writing a source generator that lets you mark properties on a partial. It'd have to be a partial record with an attribute like exclude. This would trigger the source generator to create overrides of equals and get hash code that would include all of the properties that a record would use sans the excluded ones. I kind of like that. That's an interesting idea. It's a small thing, you know, and to package up a source generator to do that. It's a little bit of work, but it's an interesting idea. I'm not going to do that right now, but it is something to think about, because then you just put on like your own property, and you could actually put it, I think, in the positional constructor at the top, like what you do typically with a record where you have this constructor or whatever. But in this case, we set our own properties and stuff like that. So there would have to be some work to consider. Can you put it here, or when you put it on the method on the seal record, and then you put the properties there, so you can have the one-liner. But that'd be a fun little project to work on. So maybe in the near future, we'll see. Anyway, back to this. So we want to have this type arguments naming context as a private private seal class. Okay. And then the type arguments context, we're going to comment it out first. Okay. And then we're going to have a method in here called get, well, internal naming context, get type arguments naming context. And what that's going to return is a new type arguments naming context. This. Okay. And we're actually going to comment that out. So that way we're forcing ourselves that anywhere within the code that's used type argument naming context right now is now going to fail from a compilation standpoint. And it's going to have to go through here. And the only way to create one is through this. Because I thought about it. I'm like, if the type itself doesn't have any type arguments and the method doesn't have any type arguments, then you're passing in basically nothing, which is what happens with the naming context, is that these are just sent to blank. And so these would just be set to variables would be blank, and then this would be also blank. So if we now compile this, we're going to get a bunch of errors because they all have to now go through this. So this is a type reference model. And we are specifically asking for a type arguments naming context, which makes sense. So this is something I didn't quite think about, which is I want it to be clear that what I'm asking for here is the naming context that's from the method itself. So for example, like in this case, this would be method get type argument naming context. Now that's going to yell because this wants it to be we're always getting it from a method. Right? We're always getting The build name is always on the method. Well, I mean, like here, type name, it's on the type. But the funny thing is that it seems like contextually it's always like associated with the method, like here. This is a type reference model, but it's always... So if I go look at the model context and I look at how build name is actually being done, I mean, context, like, what is this actually doing? We are using it to get the name of a type, but it's always in reference to a method. So I have kind of a decision to make here. Is this something? Because I get what's happening here. Like in this case, this is a parameter and we're saying on the parameter's type, build a name. But the context is within the scope of a method. So do we keep this here? And the nice thing about this was it was, you know, kind of saying this should be coming from a method's naming context. I know that people watching this are probably like, what in the world is this doing? But it's kind of this thing that's been stuck in rocks for a long time and it works. But it kind of feels a little odd now that I'm looking at it going, what is this actually supposed to do? Like, what is the... I mean, I know it's getting a name. We're building a name. And we're getting the name because we want to get something that defines the name of a type that's fully qualified and has... the generics correct and stuff, but it's always coming from the context of a method, like a method's parameter types. And it makes sense because to get the name of the type itself is irrelevant in terms of methods. Like we would never do build name on the type itself. We would always do build name on a method. And then, because a method, if you look at a method, this method model has the mock type, yeah, because that's the thing that the method is defined on. And so we can always look back up at the like the mock type here and always get So I'm starting to wonder, does it make sense just to move also on the type reference here, the build name so that it's actually on the method and not the type? Let's do that. That's going to cause all sorts of havoc, but that's okay. So we're going to want to take this and this and really destroy things and come into here and have these here. So we've got build name, and then this is going to be an internal string. And this won't take a type context. And this will take, actually what we could do, this is, my random code stream is just, I named it that because I randomly do streams on coding. So clever me. Hold on, I'll answer your question in more detail. I gotta do this refactoring before I forget what it is that I'm doing. Var current is equal to this dot mock type. And then the parent naming context is what we're passing in. So we want var naming context to be this dot get type arguments naming context. And that would actually end up becoming this. That. Ah, crap. Oh, no, it's right here. Okay. Naming context, that. Yes. That's why I did the build name and then a private method that did this. Okay. But we want just a build name, and I don't want to. Okay. Sorry, there's like 20 things going in my head talking about context. I should get back to chat. So my stream is just I go through code and code that I'm supporting. This one is a mocking library using source generators. It's written in C#. It's akin to more popular libraries like MOQ or Substitute, but it uses source generators, so there's a lot of benefits from doing that. Yeah, it's just the name of the stream. That's all about. And that's what Rox is just a mocking library. But it's a little bit more... there's some features that those other libraries have, but what's the differentiator with my library is I'm not limited by things like expression trees, which a lot of the mocking libraries are. And so one of the examples I give is I can handle anything in C#, such as ref structs. Those other libraries can't. Protected members, the other libraries can, but it's awkward. It's very natural to do it in Rox. So there's some kind of, there's definitely some benefits with going this approach. OpenGL, no, I don't know OpenGL, so I can't give an opinion on it. C++, again, I don't really know anything about it. The only time I ever did anything in C++ was 25 years ago, and that was for like a 4-month project, and that was it. I remember like some keywords and some concepts of features, but there's no way I could go into a C++ code base and be even remotely productive in it. I'd be flailing. So okay, yeah, I think that's why I did what I did, which is to have a method that was recursive. But what I should have done is made this not static. I should have made this a private method. So hold on, let me go back up all this crap that I just did. Okay, and then this, that, and then that. Okay, so let's just make this a private string, build name. And this does that. And then we pass in this get type argument name and context. Except we don't have to pass in this again, because it's not that. Current is not that. Shoot. We do want it to stay a type. Okay, okay. This mock type there. And then this becomes a name and context. And then this becomes y. Oh, shoot, this gets really ugly. Because we're in this local function. If I made it there, then that would go away. And then this is just, yeah, we needed this here. So we start when we build the name. We're starting on our mock type. We'll come in here. We'll say current. We do all this stuff like we're currently doing. And then we can still pass in, like in certain cases, the current becomes this type. What have I... Well, I know I've broken a lot of code by doing this, but what else have I broken? It doesn't make sense to have this on this. It does not make sense to have it on this anymore. Because we're always building a name for the method model. But now we have all sorts of problems. Like this, type build name. Except it's not on the type. It's on the method itself. So what we would really want to do here is method.build. Oh, I'm screwing this all up. That doesn't make sense now. No, it does. Because the method is, it's the parameters on the method, so that method, it is the type. This is also why we make branches. Oh, God. This is becoming a mess. Yeah, this is becoming a real mess. Because it isn't the... Yeah. Let's back all this out. Not the notes. Analysis. Okay. Yeah, everything should build now. Thanks, Tank. By the way, if anybody's watching and they haven't subscribed to the channel just yet, please do so. I would really appreciate it. Any new subscription helps. Yeah, it's interesting, Tack, that you said that, because just searching for this, and I said this before in other streams and other places, my intent is not to get everybody to start using this in place of MOQ or N-substitute. But if people want to, that's great. I'm all for that. You know, frankly, throughout my software development career, I started learning about the whole idea of mocking types, you know, a long time ago. And the first framework I saw that did it was RhinoMox, and that sucked. That was just horrible. MOQ and N-substitute were much better. And I kind of went overboard with unit testing, and not unit testing, that's always great, but testing with mocks. And there is a limit, I think, and there's definitely other ways to do unit testing where you're not using mocks. They can become, there's things that can go wrong with them in terms of overusing them. So I'm in full agreement with people that's like, that you should be careful in how you use them. I do think they have a place. I think there is a middle ground. I do think there is a place to have them and be able to mock stuff out, but to do it with a little bit of thought and care, not just to blindly do it everywhere. So if you need a mocking library, I'm like, use this one, because it is faster, although we're not talking like, we're on the order of micro or nanoseconds. But it also is, like I said before, it's able to handle any feature in C#. So for me, that there's those benefits, but it's also a library that I've literally spent the most time in my life putting time into. So there's a lot that I've learned from it. And it's also become a vehicle for me to handle new features that are coming, like in the next version of C#. Like, for example, C# 15 may have unions. It may have a couple of other features that may have to be addressed in rocks that I didn't anticipate. I have no idea. So it's going to be interesting. That's always a way for me to also keep up with .NET and learn how to put some of those things and address them. Anyway, speaking of this, I still think there's a benefit to having the type arguments, naming context come off of the method. Now, going the route of using that to, like, as far as I was going to go, probably not. So I still think there is a benefit to putting this on the method, but then So we'll go with that idea. Private sealed, and then we'll have a internal naming context get type arguments naming context, which returns a new type arguments naming context of this. And then we get rid of that. But that's as far as we're going to go. We're not going to try to go the route that I was saying before, because now we'll still have some build errors, which is fine. But yeah, we'll just have to say that this is expected to come from, and actually this can be internal. It is expected that parent naming context is the value returned from a method models get type arguments naming context. There. And now we just have to find, oh yeah, that has to change because this has to be just a naming context. Okay. Now what are you complaining about? Fine, okay. It technically has to be, well, no, we could, wait a minute. Because I thought, not a very common thing to do, it's internal. So I guess cannot implement an interface member because I thought you could do that these days now. Fine, whatever. I'm not going to fight this. I thought you could have different visibility on interface members, but what do I know? Okay, so then here we can just say its method get type arguments naming context. So a little bit cleaner, and I think we just have to now go through a constraint toString. What is the problem here? Well, guess what? The constraint toString no longer needs this. Because the toString here is taking the method model, and we could just get the naming context from there if we wanted to. Except there's this whole... Ugh, this is just ugly. This whole naming context crap. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. It still feels like the extraction is in the wrong place. Even though I know that this type arguments naming context is always... I don't know why. This just bothers me so much. No, where are you coming from? Like this. Again, this would just be that. So I'm going to trust my instincts. We're going to back this out. What I'm going to do is defer this until later because I don't have a good mindset on this right now. So we'll push that down on the list because I think there's something to be done there, but I just... Yeah, let's make sure that I haven't broken anything. I think it should... Okay, so we're running tests. That's good. And they all passed. Okay, that's good enough. So I think we're... Yeah, type argument same kind. I really don't know what I should do with this. I definitely think something should be done to make it just a slightly, like, not have this here. The only one that can do it is through the method. But then that raises the question again, should this always be done on a method? Well, that's the only way that you can create it. But then I'm creating these all over the place or using them as well in different places. And so I think I need a little bit more time to figure out what I exactly want to do with that. So let's go back. Some of these refactorings I'm not going to do on stream, like combining these right lines, or maybe I just do them really quickly. But there is this one. This is, again, some of these are not a big deal. So if I go look for get optional parameter, and let's just do that. Get rid of those. So there is this static string get optional parameter. This is a local function or local method I put in 3 different places. So if I actually look for this within the current project, you see there's 3 of them. And they're almost identical. I think, in fact, they're if I, it's a little hard to see, but if I get all these at the top so I can just visually take a look at what the difference is, and I could do something else with this. So we do that, and then let's bring that up. No. All right, so if I switch between all these, oh, that's right. It's in this class twice. Yeah. And then it's in here as well. And I believe these all do exactly the same thing. So I'm like, why do I have this? And then well, not that why do I have this? There's a reason to have it, but why do I have it 3 separate places? Probably because I was lazy and I just didn't think. So if you look at what get optional parameter takes, like in this case, when we're calling it, we give it the parameter, and then we look at the last one, I believe. The type name is the name of the parameter itself, so we don't have to pass, well, this again gets to the problem of this whole naming context crap that I just was struggling with. And then requires nullable is something that can be found on the parameter itself. So if we look at like the only thing is that this is different here. What we're passing in as the last parameter, because with a setter on an indexer, it's weird. The setter properties and indexers are just syntactic sugar over methods. And so the setter on an indexer, the last parameter on it is the value that you're trying to set on the indexer. But if you can also have optional parameters on an indexer. So that's where this whole optional parameter crap comes into play, because we have to, in the case of the setter, the last parameter is not the last parameter we want to look at. The last parameter we want to look at is the second to last one, not the value one. So it's a little weird. So that's why I said I think I still have to pass this in as the last parameter that I care about. But it's like here I'm doing parameter type fully qualified name with an indexer. For the method, I'm using a type name, but not the fully qualified name. And again, I have a to-do here. Why are we doing this? Why are we building name here? And again, I think it's because I just handled something once with generics and being in a context, because the method might have the same name of a type parameter that the parent type does. I think you can do that, and then it's like, which one am I talking about? It gets really screwed up. It can get really messed up in a hurry, if that makes any sense whatsoever. But at least if I put it on the parameter, the only thing I would ask is for the last name and then the type name, the parameter type name. Which, again, seems really weird. Why would I do that? If I could just grab it from, like in this case, I just get fully qualified name on an indexer, because indexers can't have their own generics. Methods can, but indexers can't. So, for reasons. But I think this way I would at least have. So if we put on parameter model here, let's go here. And let's stick that on here. We want to have an internal, internal string, get optional parameter. Okay. So we don't need to pass the first one in. That is the this. And we don't need to do nullable. Okay. So now let's use a block body for method. And then requires nullable here is just that. On this, do we require nullable annotation? This dot name, this. Yeah, take that. Take that. take that. This. Okay. So then, if we come in here and we do what I thought I needed to do, we should be able to yoink that and then say here, parameter get optional parameter, where we're going to pass in are these two things. Else. And then all that goes away. Now, where is required nullable? That, well, we're going to have to figure that out either way. So I know I always assume if it's an old guy, he's going to, maybe you need to adjust that thought there. So, so struggling with putting that nullable there. Part of me is wondering, could we do something that just says get because this code too is almost identical between all of them except this type name thing here. And this is also why I'm trying to do all this refactoring, because there's all these weird things that I've put in the code that I'm kind of like, it worked. It worked for the problem at hand, but it also, it's like, it's slightly different everywhere and there's reasons why, but coming back to it, it's like, well, why am I doing it this way? You know, well, let's not try to think about this too much. Let's go back here and say, let's get rid of that. And then down here, it would be parameter, get optional parameter for the last one, which is the second to last one. And then parameter type fully qualified name. Else that. And then here we would take this off. And then down here we would say parameter get optional parameter for this. And then the type name. Else that. Okay, does that... Let me see if this fails any tests. Nope. So that might be good enough. What's rocks? It's mocking framework in C#. Uses source generators. I usually try to put a link to an issue that I'm working on in the description. That's the repository if you want to look at it. Why don't I use Linux? I don't know, because I'm using Windows. Isn't web dev easier on that? I'm not doing web dev. So it does get rid of one method, but it's starting to also make me go, well, wait a minute. Like this code here is really almost identical. Except with the whole type name. Because in some cases we just do fully qualified name. And I get it again with indexers because they can't have generics themselves. You don't have to worry about this qualification. No, this isn't JavaScript. Yeah, this is C#. But there's also a little bit of tension of, do I really want to try to pull too much into one spot together, if that makes sense. That can start to get to be bringing in too much contextual stuff into one place, and it gets to be kind of messy. At least having this here now, even that feels a little like ugly. Like, why is this on a parameter model itself? Like, this is only for the case and yeah, this is where it starts feeling like all of this should be in one thing. Like what I really want to get here is the expectation parameter. That's really what I want to do, because an expectation, that's where I'm setting up the expectations, where I'm generating that code. The first thing I look at to see is, well, does it have an explicit default value? Because if it does, well, then we have to do this thing with this optional parameter stuff. And then we need to say, well, if it's params, then we do something with this. Otherwise, we just fall into putting in the argument type name. But this is also for defaults. Like, you only do this with defaults. Repo looks cool. Well, thank you. Appreciate that. So this code is only reachable if you get into a certain case, but it happens 3 different times. And so what I'm wondering in my head is if this really belongs on the parameter model itself. You know, or does this make more sense that this should actually be an extension method taking a parameter model? Because it really has nothing to do with a parameter model. but it does. You know. Because it's for that parameter, but it has context around it to say, I need your last parameter and I need the type name of the parameter, even though the type name in this case of a method is because we have a type argument naming context, which is that the only, where am I using this? Well, I use it in the build argument. I'm also using it here. I'm using it down here too. Why do you have like if state after if statement? Can you just let it fall through readability? I don't know where you're referring to that. I mean, if you're talking about this, there's a reason why. And it gets complicated. A lot of what's in this code base is there for a reason. I don't always necessarily remember it because it gets really complicated. But it is there for a reason. So do I really want to try to pull this out into its own thing? I don't know. Or do I just let it be because it is the way it is? And then the next time I come through here, I'll be like, why did I not refactor this? Why don't I just leave it the way, you know? Why don't I change it? I am also got to stop soon because I got to get to work. Which is just turning my chair over there and starting to work over there, but I do need to do that. I think I'll have to mull over this too, because doing what I did here is a start, but what I'm really thinking is I want to get the expectation default parameter. That's really what I want to do. And all of this could be put into parameter to do that. And that's what's so funny about this. Like type parameter, like here I use parameter type fully qualified name. But then up here, I'm using parameter type build name. Like, again, why the difference between the two? Like, if it's here, why wouldn't we do... I don't know. There's a link in the chat, Bugs, if you want to look at it. That's what Rox is. In any event, I do have to stop, so I'm going to probably wrap this up here. There's definitely going to be more work to do on this. But yeah, I mean, I made a little bit of an improvement with this, but I don't feel like it's the tension with all this, I think, comes down with this whole naming thing and how I get a name when you have the case where the name of something like that's a parameter type, you have to be concerned about the names from if the method is generic and the parameter type is based off of one of those, and then the type itself is generic, and that's why I created this whole build name, but then I don't use it in all these cases. So I'm kind of like, well, wait a minute, why? So that's why I end up with to-dos, and to-dos end up being never done. They always just stick around in code, and I know I never go back and clean them up. So but it's kind of important here, and in the sense of it would make a little bit less code. And that's what I'm trying to do with this whole refactoring work, is take the time that I've always put off and just change some stuff around. So I think I'm going to stop here and pick this up maybe Thursday morning and continue to work on this stuff and figure out what it is that I'm really trying to do here. So I want to thank everybody who stopped by, either now, live, or in the future. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it if you did that. Again, the next time I'm going to do a coding stream will probably be Thursday morning, maybe Wednesday morning. We'll see how I feel. I am going to be doing a gaming stream, continuing to play the game Stray this evening around 6:30 or 7 p.m. Central. So that's also the next time I'm going to be doing a gaming stream. But for now, I'm done with this stream. Thank you all for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you in the future.